Good evening. We'll call the meeting to order. Madam Clerk, would you please call the roll?
Sure. Ms. Hurst,
Present.
Attorney Murphy. Attorney Murphy,
Muted, probably.
I don't see him, so he's probably not.
I don't either. Okay. Ms. Naylor,
Present.
Ms. Gresham,
Present.
Ms. Perez,
Present.
Mr. Collins,
Here,
Mayor Sarno.
President, we all please rise for a moment of silence and the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you very much. I hope everybody is safe and sound out there. We're monitoring the nor'easter, the tropical storm, the remnants of the hurricane, and there is some power that is out. Many trees are down and wires are down. All of our public safety officials are out there working around the clock to get that everything restored and cleaned up. So don't mind me if I take a call or I'm monitoring on the walkie-talkie. I also would like to thank my Commissioner of Health and Human Services, Helen Colton Harris, for being here this evening, and Director of Facilities and Parks Management, Pat Sullivan, Paul Foster, stats from the school department, and also the Focus Springfield, Brendan and crew. Thank you very much for being able to allow us, and the school committee, woman Latonia Naylor, thank you, and Vice Chair Collins on pursuing this town meeting we really wanted to have to make a presentation of what the three possibilities and then questions that we're going to address. But before I turn over to Vice Chair Collins, who'll give you the logistics, the bottom line here is that please rest assured that not only a structural educational aspect will be put forward, we're going to base this decision just as important on public health, medical, and the sciences in the best interests of our children, our staff, the teachers, everybody across the board. So we will do that without question. Without further ado, let me turn it over to Vice Chair Collins, who'll give the logistics and ground rules. Then we'll go into a brief presentation, and then we look forward to trying to address as many questions as we can. And thank you for everybody that is tuned in. We appreciate your continued belief and investment in our city of Springfield. Vice Chair Collins, you have to say the first one.
the screen. Oh, thank you. Okay, it was on the wrong one. Good evening, everyone. This is going to be an interesting meeting because it's being simultaneously broadcast in 6 languages all at the same time. So because of that, we certainly need to enunciate and speak slowly, and there are rules that we're going to have to follow. You can see on the screen in front of you that we have links for audio translation. The presentation is being streamlined in English as well as Spanish, Arabic, Nepali, Somali, and Vietnamese. Okay, the reopening plan. Oops, thank you. Reopening plan for fall 220. This is the town hall, and those, you see links there. So anyone who has not, if you're not in a room yet and you want to go to one of the rooms, you can see that there are, all the links are listed on the screen, which are focusspringfield.com/town hall for this particular one. If you want to do Spanish, it's focusspringfield.com/town hall-Spanish, focusspringfield.com/town hall.Nepali or -Nepali, I'm sorry. focusspringfield.com/town hall-Somali, focusspringfield.com/town hall-Arabic, and focusspringfield.com/town hall Vietnamese. So if you, we'll give you about 10 seconds or 15 seconds if you haven't yet, so you have time to enter that address and click on, and you can see the presentation as the slides will be there for you. Okay. Okay, here's our agenda for this evening. First, we will have an overview of the plan given by the superintendent and a number of other staff, which for the school committee itself, you have seen some of this before, so we get a chance to see it again. For many people in public, this is the first time. So they will give an overview, and then we will have a question and answer period. To ask a question, you can text a question to area code 413-238-1878, or you can email your question to COMMOFFICE@springfieldpublicschools.com. Please include your name and address as we do in our open meetings with your question. Okay, I will now turn it over to the superintendent.
Good evening, everyone. Wanted to give you the key themes that we received as a school district and the other districts in the Commonwealth received from the state relative to the guidance on reopening. So we were told to develop plans for fully in-person, hybrid, which is a combination of an in-person and remote, and a fully remote plan, and be ready to switch modes quickly as the case dictates, as driven by the virus. Plans are due to DESE on August 10th, and they require school committee approval. One directive we were given from DESE was prioritizing having as many students in school as often as possible, particularly prioritize in-school instruction for our highest need students, students with disabilities, which we have probably in our low incidence special ed programs, and English language learners, level 1 students. Emphasizing supporting social emotional needs of students as they adjust to the return to school, regardless of which plan we're in. Focus on keeping all students safe. So we're going to require all the PPE, the mask wearing, the social distancing, frequent hand sanitizing, and follow all the DESE guidelines relative to what we need to do relative to keep people as safe as possible. Another directive was minimize the transitions and mixing of students. So we're going to schedule our students in classrooms and minimize the movement as much as possible. That'll, again, allow us to contact trace should we have an issue with the virus, and minimize the number of interactions in a day. And we can change the schedules to do that. And one thing we were given by DESE, and the school committee approved it last week, was we reduced the school year to 170 days, student contact days, with 10 days being added up front for professional collaboration time to go with our 5 normal PD days. So the staff would have extra time to get ready for the planning of opening school.
Just want to interject for 1 minute. For all presenters, including you, superintendent, in between bullets, do like a 3 count in your head. Give each translator some chance to catch up, and we'll do like a 5 count between slides so that we can hopefully pace this for everyone.
Okay, the guiding principles for the Springfield Public Schools. Again, as many students as possible have in-school instruction while keeping staff and students safe. So the safety piece is a high priority. Our highest need students, again, getting them in as much possible instructional time as we possibly can. Again, safely. Chris is giving me signals to slow down, so I'm going too fast, sorry.
Thank you to all our translators, by the way.
Yeah,
I appreciate
for
that.
putting up with me. Every student is attending school regularly for in-person instruction unless we are required to return for fully remote school. Every student has a consistent schedule that prioritizes instruction in ELA, math, science, and social studies on in-person instructional days. Students have virtual classes with their teachers on remote learning days in a hybrid model, and engage in class and learning activities requiring at least as much time as would have been spent in school. Every student has a check-in with their homeroom advisory or crew teacher every school day, whether in person or remote, to support their social and emotional needs.
Paul, did you see the request to post the phone number for texting into the chat? That came up. Because that's something we can do. Okay, just before we go to the next page, there was a request made that we post the phone number where people can send in a text question into the chat function, and Paul is doing that right now.
What our team did, I'm sorry.
Teresa put it in already? I think Teresa put it in. Thank you, Teresa.
So our team was charged with doing a reopening feasibility analysis and report the results to school committee of that analysis. So one of the things we did was we surveyed families at the end of June about their plans for the fall. That included not just a survey, but phone calls from staff members at that school talking about whether a family would be interested in having a remote only for next year or an in-person model if that was possible. We're also planned 2 additional surveys. One survey we did relative to a hybrid model, choosing whether it was every other week or 2 days a week. And then we also had some meetings with parents to solicit feedback. We measured instructional spaces in every school. We did DESI's parametric analysis of all of our schools to take a look at the square footage in every classroom in every school and how many students we could fit in safely in each classroom with 6 feet and 3 feet of social distancing. But what we came up with that is that we'd be recommending 6 feet of social distancing because our plan would involve the students eating in the room. So that would require us to go to a hybrid model if we were going to return person students live, because we just wouldn't have the space to return all the students and have that 6 foot of distancing that CDC requires. And then we looked at examining staffing scheduling options so that all the instructional spaces could be adequately used and staffed through the day. We also had to do a thorough analysis of all of our transportation routes. One problem we had was DESI's transportation guidance just arrived about 2 weeks ago. So that set us back relative to planning all the transportation. So that is going to take some time. And a lot of the DESI guidance, unfortunately, came out later than was anticipated. We didn't get that transportation guidance until a few weeks ago, and we didn't get the facility guidance until a few weeks ago. But we're working with that to meld those into our plans and get those things programmed.
Superintendent, if I can everybody hear okay? And the superintendent, we have our masks here too, but it's off so you can hear properly, so he's not muffled. We just want to double check. Everybody can hear okay? All right, thank you, Mr. Superintendent.
So as we talked about earlier, the DESI guidance was 3 options for reopening: a full return to school, all students attending school every day. Again, our buildings, we didn't have the space in any of our buildings to accommodate all the students returning every day and having the appropriate distancing. Option 2 would be a hybrid return to school. Most students would attend 2 days every week and learn remotely 3 days a week. And families can choose, regardless of which plan we're in, to stay fully remote. So if they feel that is what they want to do for their child, that's an option for all families. And our schools in the 3rd survey are going to contact the families, make sure they understand that, and find out what their choice is and which option they prefer. And then option 3 would be a remote learning only plan. All students learning remotely 5 days a week and not returning to school right now. So option one, again, the full return to school. As I said, after we did our building analysis, there are some districts that have had severe declining enrollment, have a lot of extra space in their facilities. That could be an option for them. It really isn't for us. There was no way we could provide the 6-foot distancing that the CDC recommended. So we are not recommending taking a look at that right now unless things change drastically with the virus. Option two, a hybrid return to school. Again, under our hybrid plan, schools, we'd have students attending 2 days a week in live and learning remotely 3 days a week. Students would be assigned Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday and Friday. One thing we did for everyone, and Paul Foster did a great job at this, is identifying siblings in the same household, regardless of how many different schools they were at, and putting them in the same group so that they'd be attending schools the same day, even if they're at different schools. So that we thought that would be helpful for parents. One thing we've been asked to look at and we feel strongly about is students in low incident special ed programs and level 1 English learners. We would try to have them attend Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Try to have them come in every day. Again, that's transportation permitting. We just got the transportation guidance and haven't been able to program all the buses yet. On remote learning days, students will have multiple live videos with teachers as well as graded assignments to be completed independently. Remote learning classes and assignments will amount to a full day of school time. So as opposed to what we did last spring with the emergency shutdown, with how DESE set up the remote learning plan, if this is going to be a longer term situation, it needs to be a more robust plan. The students need to be doing more work. They need to be on for a full day. They need to be graded, and then attendance needs to be taken so that we're providing a full day and rigorous lessons as they deserve. So again, families can choose for their students to remain fully remote if they have health concerns or they want that for their students. And again, we're going to take attendance on all days, whether it's remote or in person, and record it with DESE. Option 3 is a remote learning only plan. All students would be learning remotely 5 days a week, and they wouldn't return to school for a certain period of time. Students would have a daily video meeting with their homeroom advisory or crew teacher. Attendance, again, would be taken daily. Students would have several live video-based classes per day with their teachers. Students would also have daily activities to be completed independently. Each week, students would have multiple graded assignments that would be required per subject or class. Daily online class and independent work, again, would amount to a full school day of work. Student work would be graded normally, as we always grade them with our SPS grading frameworks. So again, as opposed to the pass, fail, or the credit, no credit that was talked about last year, this is full grading and a much more serious, robust remote learning only program. Going to turn it now over to our CSOs to talk about the teaching and learning scheduling and hybrid.
Good evening. As was previously indicated, students will be assigned to a cohort based on the number of students at each school and the number who can fit into a classroom with 6 foot of social distance. Each cohort, to the best extent possible, will remain together throughout the course of the day in the same room on each of our in-person days to minimize transitions and the mixing of students. At the secondary level, this will mean each cohort will take the same set of classes. And our special education services and supports will be provided within that classroom. Students will receive in-person instruction in ELA, math, science, and social studies, as well as specials and electives on their in-person days. All students will have a homeroom, crew, or advisory that will meet every day on both person and remote days. And all classes will meet with their teachers at least twice per week on remote days to provide instruction and follow up on student remote activities. The chart below will be the chart that our students will, the elementary level, demonstrates the number of minutes our students will engage in live instruction for each content area, the number of minutes they'll engage in remote instruction by content area, and in the area of ELA and math, it indicates the number of minutes that students will also engage remotely on iReady, and it gives you the total number of minutes per week that students would be engaged by content area. Specials will also occur on in-person and remote days. And by specials, we mean physical education, art, or music. And on both in-person and remote days, our students will receive their EL and SPED services as required by their EL level or their individualized education plan.
With regards to teaching and learning at the secondary level, during in-person days, every student will meet in ELA, math, science, and social studies over their two in-person days per week for at least 100 minutes, with 120 minutes being preferable. Please note that if a student has already met their high school graduation requirements of 3 years in science or social studies, this will not be required, and students will have the ability to take electives or other courses that they might be interested in.
We are being asked to slow down a little bit for the speakers, please.
Every home group, advisory, or crew must meet each in-person day for daily check-ins and social emotional learning check-ins. And all other courses outside of the 4 core academic subjects will rotate among in-person days. During remote learning days, in all classes, every student will have at least 2 virtual classes per week per class with their teacher. For any class that is entirely remote, students should have at least 3 virtual classes per week per class with their teacher on one of their remote days. Check-ins and daily attendance will take place on remote days during homeroom, advisory, and crew classes. And students will have at least 2 graded assignments to complete per week per class, and 3 graded assignments per week for students who are working entirely remotely. And as is true with the elementary level, for all students who are English learners or who are on IEPs, their EL and SPED services will be provided on both in-person and remote days. As mentioned, all English learners will be supported during teaching and learning time. English learners will be prioritized according to their level and language needs and will be placed into either an A-B cohort or a C cohort, depending on their level and in some cases, depending on their student growth percentile. English learners at level 1 in English proficiency will be programmed for up to 4 days of in-person learning and will receive language support from an ESL educator. English learners who are placed into the AB cohorts will receive instruction by an SEI endorsed educator along with their ESL services. Regardless of whether or not an English learner is being instructed in person, remotely, or in a hybrid model, all schools will ensure that English learners receive their ESL instruction. They will also be provided with scaffolded instruction on the days they will be learning remotely. And students opting to work remotely will also receive instruction by an ESL teacher.
Dr. Morris will present the plan for students with disabilities.
Good evening. Consistent with the DESE guidance, students with moderate to severe disabilities, which is determined by their IEPs, will be prioritized for up to 4 days of in-person learning. These services will be provided in their IEP, either through a push-in model or virtually.
You need to slow down just a little bit. So remember, we've got 5 translators.
Okay, will do. Sorry.
No problem.
So services for student support services for students will be provided again, either through a push-in model, if an in-person, or virtually, whenever possible. Whenever we change the services in the IEP with regard to delivery, we will be documenting and notifying, sorry, going too fast, documenting and notifying the parents in writing in their native language, so they are aware of the changes. Students with disabilities who opt out and want remote learning will be provided with a schedule of classes, intervention services, and therapies consistent with their IEP, either offered synchronously or asynchronously. Frequent / daily interactions with teachers and other staff members will be maintained to ensure participation. Again, the provision of in-person services for the high needs, moderate to severe disabled student is dependent on the availability of transportation. Regarding social emotional supports, every student will be provided with supports through a homeroom, advisory, or crew every day, whether in person or remote. The homeroom and advisory and crew will focus on relationship building and supporting the students' social emotional needs as they navigate the in-person or hybrid learning model, as well as remote if we decide to go that way. Counseling services will be delivered as indicated in IEPs, 504s, most likely through a teletherapy virtual model. PBIS, positive behavior interventions and supports, will continue to be used across both in-person and remote learning environments. Second step, which is our social emotional curriculum, will be implemented at the elementary school level. And City Connects will continue their work providing wraparound services and outreach to students and families. Regular STAT team meetings will be held, whether in person or remote, to monitor student progress, both academically and socially and emotionally.
Stefan Yurishkin, Chief Academic Officer, will make the next presentation.
Teaching and Learning Professional Development. During this year's August Professional Development, all teachers will receive professional development on the following. There will be safety protocols for schools and classrooms in the hybrid model, as well as remote. There will be learning management platforms that are used to support remote learning. There will be hybrid learning and remote learning models, trauma-informed practices in school settings, and also content-specific professional development on how to deliver the Springfield Public Schools curriculum in a hybrid format. This will also include guidance on instructional activities that should be done in person and what should be done remotely. Currently, resources are being developed and curated by teams of Springfield Public School teachers and the academic department to ensure that all teachers have robust content. This will include videoed lessons using our curriculum, and it'll be provided to students and to teachers. Teaching and Learning Assessment. There is a district assessment calendar that will be streamlined for the 2020-2021 school year, and it'll ensure the maximum time for instruction. All assessments will be taken from home, and they will remain valid, and they will be assigned as part of the remote work to ensure that in-person instructional time is focused on interaction rather than assessment. The priority assessments will be diagnostics, which are used to gauge student levels and ensure instruction is aligned to and differentiated for different student needs. And there also will be formative assessments, which assesses student progress throughout the year toward mastery of grade level standards. Currently, at this time, MCAS remains required at all grade levels for the 2020-2021 school year. Teaching and learning remote platforms. During the spring 2020 closure, there were a number of software platforms that were being used by schools and teachers, which proved to be a challenge for families that had multiple students in either different grades or in different schools. So moving forward for the 2020-2021 school year, all teachers will be required to use a common learning management system for their grade level as follows. In pre-K through 5th, they will use Schoology, and in grades 6 through 12, they will use Unified Classroom. Students will need to access numerous sites and resources when completing remote learning tasks, but all the activities, tasks, and assignments will be organized in these platforms for students and families. This will be their starting point, and parents and students will know what needs to be completed on any given day.
So as it relates to supporting students' technology needs while they are learning in a hybrid or remote environment, we will coordinate with schools to ensure that all students who don't yet have an SPS laptop will receive one. We are also going to be working with Comcast to provide internet access for families who do not yet have internet access at home, and will rely on hotspots for families who are living outside Springfield and lack internet. To improve our support for students and families using our technology, we're going to be doing several things, including training staff and community partners in how to support basic technology questions, providing videos in 6 different languages on YouTube, and working with individual schools to provide tech orientations to how to use the technology for remote learning prior to the start of the school year. Should we come back to school in a hybrid learning model, we will be making sure that students who elect to remain fully remote will have all of the opportunities provided for a robust educational experience. That includes being with a cohort of students in a homeroom, having assigned teachers who serve their cohort of students across each subject area, meeting multiple times per week for virtual instruction, so live classes held virtually, and a series of specific weekly expectations for learning activities and graded assignments.
Jeannie Clancy, our Director of Nursing, is going to take up the next slide. Slides.
A new focus for keeping students and staff safe is to minimize transitions and mixing of students. Therefore, nurses will now go to classrooms to evaluate students. The three options for care are: 1, remain in the classroom; 2, bring students back to the nurse's office; 3, the medical waiting room, which is for students with COVID-19 symptoms. The medical waiting room is a separate space from the nurse's office. And students will have a surgical mask and face shield placed over their cloth mask while in the room. And all staff assigned to monitor students in the room will be taught how to put on and take off their personal protective equipment. An overview of personal protective equipment. The first one is cloth masks are to be worn by all staff and students, grade 2 and up. Exceptions are students with medical, behavioral, or other challenges. Face shields are to be worn if there's a risk of splash or spray of body fluids, and can also be an option for students with medical or behavioral concerns. Gloves are to be worn with any contact with body fluid, suspected symptomatic students, and when disinfecting. Transparent masks are worn by staff for students who lip read and for students learning to read. Disposable masks are given to staff and students that arrive without a cloth mask. Additional PPE provided for nurses and staff monitoring the medical waiting room are KN95 masks, face shields, gowns, and gloves. All staff will be trained in proper use of equipment. Another new protocol for nursing is contact tracing. If the school is notified that a student or staff tested positive for COVID-19, the school nurse will determine the date of symptom onset, determine if the student or staff was in the building while symptomatic and 2 days before symptoms began, determine who had close contact. The nurse will call Springfield Health and Human Services for guidance. The nurse will notify staff and families of potential exposure and will then follow up with staff and families to make sure they understand next steps.
Nini, as you go through the rest of your slides, please read all the bullets. So the translators might be having trouble. I know you're trying to go.
I'm sorry, we lost internet and I'm only on my phone. And print is so small, I'm going by memory.
Well, you're doing excellent, Jean.
You're doing really well.
So I don't, if someone else can read them for me, it's, if I move it on my phone, I lose the connection because streaming isn't that great.
Okay, when you're, bullets that you can't see, for you for the period.
The next section, Patrick Roach, Chief Financial Officer, will cover.
Operations for in-person school building access protocols. Schools will, to the extent possible, be set up with different doors for entrance versus exit, consistent with public health guidance. Visitors to schools will be limited and by appointment only. For example, parent-teacher conferences and IEP meetings will be conducted remotely. Staff will, prior to entering the building, certify that they are symptom-free. Regular external partners, like AmeriCorps or student teachers, will follow the same safety and entrance protocols as staff. Outside clinicians will provide services to students remotely. Out of school time providers will be working with our students remotely. Operations for in-person school facilities. Maximizing ventilation. Classroom windows will remain open throughout the day. Kitchen exhaust fans will run 24/7. HVAC systems, all being checked and repaired as needed, will be completed prior to the first day of school. Upgrading of air filters to MERV 13 or better, which includes virus filtration.
Could you see my face?
Fresh air intakes being set up to consistently run while buildings are occupied. In bathrooms, hand dryers will be shut off and paper towel dispensers are being installed. Bathroom exhaust fans will be set to run constantly. Continual disinfection of bathrooms will occur throughout the day. No drinking from drinking fountains will be allowed. Water bottle filling stations will be installed. There will be a plexiglass window installed in each main office. Signage will be installed throughout the building, requiring social distancing and hand washing. Hand sanitizer dispensers are being installed in all classrooms. All buildings and facility procedures are being reviewed by an industrial hygienist, with any necessary changes being made prior to school opening. School cleaning plans are being updated to focus on cleaning high-touch areas. Classrooms are being used that are used multiple times a day with different students will be cleaned and disinfected between the different groups of students. All schools and classrooms will be cleaned and disinfected every night. On Wednesdays, between cohorts of students, schools will be deeply cleaned and disinfected, consistent with public health guidelines. Food service. Students will primarily eat breakfast and lunch in their assigned classroom. Breakfasts and lunches will be ordered electronically, with all food prepackaged and delivered to classrooms. Disinfectant wipes and trash bags will be provided to each classroom. Bags, rosters, and trash will be placed in the hallways after meals for collection. Students will be able to remove their masks and eat with 6 feet of social distance being maintained. There will be evening distribution at 17 sites throughout the city from 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. on Tuesday and Friday for families to pick up lunches and dinners. Meals for 3 days will be distributed for 4 days each Friday. Transportation. We received transportation guidance from DESE on July 22nd. Final plans still under development, but highlights include extra disposable masks will be made available for students. PPE will be provided for bus monitors. Attendance will be taken on each bus for purposes of contact tracing. Buses will be loaded from the rear to the front and exit from the front to the rear. Seats will be marked with an X and alternate each row. Vans will be disinfected after each trip. First student is exploring a disinfection product that will keep surfaces disinfected for 30 days, and windows will remain open.
Zoe Kavan will go over the next piece, and this will be how we would shift from different learning modes based on, again, the infection rates and what's going on. So Zoe Kavan, our Chief Communications Officer.
Thank you. Readiness for shifts. Shift to fully remote learning. The Springfield Public Schools reopening plan includes procedures and expectations for full remote learning. Remote expectations outline expectations for daily meetings of homeroom, crew, or advisory for relationship building, social emotional support, information sharing, and taking attendance. Requirements for the number of virtual classes that must be held per week per class. The number of learning activities and grading assignments each student must complete per class per week. And a requirement that virtual classes and learning activities daily equal at least as much time as the traditional school day. Resources are being developed to support hybrid learning. Instructional videos, readings, and other content are being designed to cover the entire curriculum, which will allow us to use these materials for all lessons should we need to shift to fully remote learning. The schedules being designed define what courses students will take when at the school during hybrid or remote learning. Schedules are also being designed such that they can simply be extended to additional in-person days. So for example, an A group student attending school on Monday and Tuesday will have a schedule that simply can be extended to Wednesday through Friday if a return to fully in-person schooling is possible.
Once again, if you would like to ask a question, please text your question to 413-238-1878 or email your question to COMMOFFICE@springfieldpublicschools.com. Please include your name and address with the question. While some people we have had a number of people already submit questions, so anyone else can submit questions at this point. As we go forward, we will alternate between questions that have been either emailed in or texted in, and either Azel Kavan or Paul will read the questions, and then an appropriate staff member will answer them. We'll start with text, the first question from text.
From a point of view, difficult school process, especially when high schools tend to switch classes for students on a day-to-day basis. A days they have certain classes and other classes. Is the school committee aware that students and staff not only need to be safe, but students also need to be able to properly learn in an environment needed for learning? For education is crucial, and limiting time in school for 2 days does not allow for that.
So I will answer that question. I think when you look at a 2-day hybrid, we realize it's not the same as being in school for 5 full days, and we wouldn't assert that it is. Unfortunately, when we looked at the parametric studies with DESE, we could not bring everyone in safely and keep everyone 6 feet apart. So we had to come up with something where we would have hybrid for 2 days so we could bring students in safely. And we would supplement that with a robust 3-day remote learning program to, again, try to do the best we can to provide quality learning experiences.
Okay, we will go to Azel with an email question.
I would like to know if virtual learning is part of the plans for school this fall. Are getting working laptops to all the students before school starts going to be addressed?
Paul, do you want to answer that one, or do you want me to?
Yeah. So the answer to that is whether we go hybrid or remote, technology will be essential to our student learning this fall, and we will be making sure that every student in kindergarten through 12th grade in the Springfield Public Schools has a laptop computer.
Thank you, Paul. We actually have a third venue for questions, and Denise Hurst has been taking some questions that were submitted in Spanish. So she will read the question first in Spanish and then in English, and then a staff member will answer the question. Denise, if you would go ahead.
Absolutely, Vice Chair. Me gustaría saber si los estudiantes que no quieren regresar a la escuela por temor del virus pueden tomar sus clases desde su casa, así como se hizo antes. For those students who are not willing to return to school for fear of the virus, will they be able to stay home and take class like they did before?
So we're absolutely going to have a robust remote learning program. We're going to have a robust remote learning program for all students who choose not to come to school.
So the simple answer is yes, they may choose to stay home.
Yes.
We'll now go back to Paul for the next text question.
The last quarter of the school year was very difficult and new to us all. It felt like every teacher was using a different system for students to submit work. How can we make sure there is consistency across the board to ensure kids are less frustrated and better comply with the requirements?
Do you want to answer that?
Yeah, so that was definitely a lesson learned during the closure after March 13th. And as we talked about in the presentation, all teachers will be using the same online software to organize their work. And the goal is to make that easier for students and families.
Thank you, Paul. We'll move to Azelle for the next email question.
I would like to know if there would be any Zoom meetings for the students if the school district decides to have online classes.
Sure, if I know.
What's the context of the
Yeah, we're not sure what the person meant by Zoom meetings
kids working
for
together?
students.
Will it live?
Pardon me?
Azelle, is the question kind of about whether students will be live online with their teachers?
Or is it students working together, like they might do in a classroom? Is that, what's the intent or content of that question?
Question is not expanded any further than wanting to know if there would be any Zoom meetings for the students if the school district has online classes.
So if is asking the students will be live interaction with their teachers, the answer is yes. They will be getting lessons, live interaction with their teachers. If the question is about group Zoom meetings, I guess each school would have to, I can see maybe a homeroom or crew being done in a group Zoom. So that may possibly also happen.
Yeah, I think so.
So if we move on to Denise with the next Spanish question, please.
Absolutely. Mi pregunta es, mi hijo tiene una condición hereditaria de la hemoglobina baja y su sistema inmune está ya comprometido. Si mi hijo le da la coronavirus, las posibilidades de morir son altas. ¿Qué pasa con esos niños? My son has an autoimmune condition. His possibilities of dying from contracting the coronavirus are high. What happens to these children?
So what we would suggest for a child with those circumstances is to do remote learning from home until probably a vaccine, until we come up with a vaccine.
Thank you. Paul, that brings us back to you with the next text question.
This is a long one. This might be for Helen. Springfield has had nearly 100 cases in the past 14 days, and the state positivity rate is over 2%. Mind you, this is the question coming from the texter. This is not, I'm not saying that's accurate. What metrics will be set to move between remote and hybrid? As a parent, I don't feel comfortable sending my child when community transmission is this high. I also support the teachers and wouldn't want them to get ill or worse, traumatizing my kid. I think more parents want remote. And then there's two specific questions. How many cases will reclose a school? And if indoor gatherings are capped at 25, how does the state think this is okay?
We're going to bring
Commissioner Helen Calton.
Commissioner Helen Calton from our Health Commission.
Very appreciative that she's here.
So it appears that the question is having to do with what would happen if COVID-19 happened in a school building, and would we, what action would we take? The other one was about the number of cases and when we, the number of cases. The number of cases right now in the Commonwealth and in the city of Springfield are probably around 2%, 2.2%. They're the lowest in the nation at this point. That does not mean that we are in a position to be able to say that we are out of the woods as far as COVID is concerned. So I wouldn't say that, but the assurance.
Just slower because we have 6 minutes. That's all.
Sorry. So the second part of the question had to do with phases, if I remember correctly, Paul. What was that part?
Yeah, sorry, what's the next question?
What was the criteria?
What would cause us to reclose the school? Yeah, what's our criteria?
The criteria for reclosing a school would be done with the Board of Health in consultation with the State Department of Public Health, the superintendent, and certainly with some input from the school committee. But that would be a public health decision that would be made based on the science and with public health professionals. There was something about the phases, I thought. There was something that.
There was more of an editorial comment that more people, she could remember the question, would like to stay remote.
And any parent who wants to stay remote can.
I just think, and again, I do appreciate that Commissioner Helen Calton Harris has taken the time to be with us this evening. The rest of the cabinet and yeoman work, continuing to conquer and defeat this COVID-19. As we said in the opening, besides the educational aspect, we're going to base it on public health, medical, and science. And that will dictate what we do or do not do, or any type of transition that might or might not take place.
Thank you, Helen and May.
Thank you.
We'll be moving on to Azelle for the next email question, please.
Why is the district not considering doing 4.5 days every other week? Children go to school until lunchtime and are sent home with their lunch. Less time with the mask per day, less chance of exposure per day with alternating weeks. There's time to clean after school, and the children and teachers won't be exposed during lunchtime.
So we looked on that, but again, days, when we look at student attendance for half days, it's very, very poor over the years. And so we thought the full days would be more beneficial to increase the student contact hours. And again, our half-day attendance has been abysmal over the years.
Thank you. Moving on to Mrs. Hurst, please, for the next Spanish question.
Mi hijo es un adolescente que comienza escuela intermediata y con autismo. Esto es un cambio total y no quiere asistir por lo del COVID. ¿Qué van a hacer con estos niños? My son is an adolescent who is going to begin middle school, and he also has autism. This is a complete change for him, and he does not want to attend school because of COVID. what are we going to do with these kids?
So I'd like to have Dr. Mary Ann Morris, the special ed director, answer that.
Dr. Morris, please.
Yes, yeah. So I certainly appreciate that challenge. Students with disabilities, autism, it's very difficult for them to make those connections, to lose the schedule, the predictability. We're going to work very, very hard to make sure that we put in as many of the supports as possible, certainly in person, but remotely, doing some of the social emotional supports, the communication supports, the assistive technology, some of the ABA with TeachTown, and some of those very specific types of instructional supports that our students would have been getting had they been in school. We'll be working very hard to make sure we replicate as many of them as possible in a remote environment. It is difficult, and we have very dedicated folks in my department, autism specialists and special ed teachers, who are going to do the very best they can to try to make this the best possible scenario if your child comes to school or decides to stay remote, the combination of both. It's not perfect. We can't make it perfect, but we've learned a lot since the spring about what it is that we can do. We've done a lot of work over the summer, providing services in summer school to our students with autism. So we have more expertise around how to work with our kids, our kiddos that struggle with disabilities. Again, we're going to do the best we can to try to get those supports and instructional methodologies in place as best as they were when students were coming to school.
Thank you, Dr. Blair. For the people, I didn't ask that we all raise our voice and speaker, the microphone. So the next question will be back to a text question from Paul Foster.
This is a 4-part question. I'll probably do it each piece. Will staff and students get temp checks like going into the doctors or certain businesses?
Jeannie, do you want to take that? Jeannie Clancy, our nursing director.
Brendan, can you unmute Jeannie Clancy, please?
Oh, I did it.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Sorry. So at this time, the DESE and the CDC don't require temperature checks because the information isn't always accurate. Students can have mild symptoms. They can be asymptomatic, and it can give you a false sense of security that you know who's sick. They've chosen to do a parents' education piece where they're gonna check their students before they come to school and monitor for any symptoms of COVID. So that's the plan to go forward, to not have any child in school that's sick.
Thank you, Jeannie. Paul, the second part of that question, please.
Will there be uniform masks and certain masks that aren't allowed, such as neck gaiters?
Probably a uniform policy issue, and we'll have to work on that relative to the policy. Masks are required, but just like every other article with our uniform policy, we have to have a team look at that.
Thank you, Superintendent. I'm sure, just to embellish a little bit, I'm sure that whomever asked the question, they can anticipate that any mask with anything inappropriate on it will not be allowed in school. How about the third part of the question?
How are students getting individual supplies such as pencils, crayons, notebooks? Is this on parents, teachers, or is the district working on it?
So the district always orders all of those supplies for all the students, and we'll have done that again this year.
So yes, the district will be supplying and you'll figure out distribution at some point.
But we've always done that at the school level. Well, how would we get supplies if they're only remote?
True. I think that was part of the question.
Yeah, so we would figure out a distribution piece.
Thank you.
And lastly, fall sports and after-school activities, are these a no-go?
So right now, MIAA has said that they're delayed till September 14th. And at that juncture, they have a team that's gonna make a decision relative to sports. It could be a completely different schedule. Something that occurred in the fall in the past could actually occur in the spring. And they may open up with some of the safer sports that are more easily socially distant. So more information to come from an MIAA team through DESE on that.
Thank you, Superintendent. Iselle, we'll move to you for the next email question.
Sure. What will a typical day in preschool look like for students in light of COVID-19 related restrictions and precautions?
Dr. Morris, take that one.
I can try to take that one. Preschool, at this point, we have a team working on it. We have some challenges with our little 3-year-olds accessing technology, but we have tried to do some of that. We have done a lot in the way of work packets. We've sent home a lot of books, and there's also some public channels that have music videos and instructional videos. So we're going to have to kind of pull together a variety of different resources to make the preschool experience as rigorous as possible and as engaging as possible. There's keeping in mind that these are little children and they should not necessarily be in front of a computer for large amounts of time. So it's going to have to be kind of a multi-sensory, multimodal approach. But we are working on that. It'll be like, hopefully we'll get to morning meetings and those types of group activities.
Okay, we've got 170 text questions, so we're going to try to move more expeditiously if we can. But Denise, you would be next with the next Spanish question. Mrs. Nurse?
So the next one that I have, I'm taking them in order. It's more of a statement than a question. Las escuelas deben de seguir por computadora. The person is stating that they believe that schools should continue to occur by way of computer. I'm speculating they mean by remote.
Thank you, Denise. We'll treat that as an opinion and we'll do the next text question.
The question is, what will we do with students who have asthma or allergies that cough a lot? Will we be sending them to the COVID waiting room every time they cough?
I would ask our nursing supervisor, Jeannie Clancy, respond to that.
Oh, okay, so symptoms of COVID are going to be hard to manage in school, but the plan is to work with the parents of students with asthma so that we know that their symptoms are being controlled as best as possible. And as long as we know they have had no other symptoms and that it is a cough or asthma, then they should be allowed to continue education as normal. But the challenge is someone is going to have to help us with that. And I'm meeting with the school physicians to come up with a plan, because we do know a lot of the children with asthma cough, and cough is on the list of a symptom, but it's also on a list with a caveat that if there are other symptoms or not another known cause for the cough.
Thank you, Jeannie. I'm sure that that's going to require you to have more communication with asthmatic parents so that they can keep you apprised of.
Yes, that's our plan, and to get the rescue meds into school.
Thank you. We will move on to the Azelle, please, for the next email question.
Yes. It's a two-part question. We've already addressed one part of it. If we open in the hybrid model, how will students be checked each morning? Will staff have their temperature taken every morning before they enter the building?
Is that the question that was not addressed?
The question is students being checked, and then the second part is specific to staff.
Thanks.
So I'd have Jeannie Clancy, again, our Director of Nursing, address that.
Okay, so again, the recommendation for entry into school is for everyone to do their own self-assessment for staff. And we're working on the process for that. So the staff would certify that they don't have a fever, that they don't have any symptoms, that they haven't been exposed to anyone testing positive for COVID. And that's what we're going to teach parents as far as doing their own self-assessment at home for their students. So they would be checking for all the symptoms, making sure the student doesn't have a fever, and not sending a child to school that's sick.
Thank you, Jeannie. Denise, that's back to you. Do you have any more questions, Denise? Mrs. Hurst?
Yeah, I'm just looking through them. Some of them I feel like we have answered. I think we have one that we could. El pasado semestre no fue fácil para nadie. ¿Cómo trabajarán los estudiantes de vocacional practicando su programa si estos deciden quedarse en las casas? The past semester was not easy for anyone. How will we work for those students who are in vocational classes? So if we decide to stay home.
So I would defer that to Kim Wells, our secondary chief school officer.
Can you just repeat the question one more time? My internet was coming in a little bit.
No worries.
Thank you.
The past semester was not easy for anyone. How will we work for those students who are taking or are in vocational classes if we decide to stay home, decide to stay remotely?
So we're working on a plan at the secondary vocational technical high school that will look a little bit differently, but will include both the CVTE classes and the related services, both in a hybrid model and remotely. And DESE just recently released its guidance for technical vocational high schools. So we're actually working with the principal right now to determine what that will look like. And we'll be putting that information out and guidance out along with that as we go through it. But we're building a plan, so we'll be able to deliver that accordingly.
Thank you, Kim. Paul, for the next text question.
Will there be more hands-on with teacher interaction via Zoom or other video chat methods? Or they specifically mentioned first grade, but I think for early grade students with remote learning.
So I would defer that one to Stefania Rashilla, our chief academic officer.
Sure. So there will be interaction When students are either in the hybrid or remote with their teacher, there will be a set schedule and specific times where they will be getting live lessons from their teachers.
Thank you. Zell, do you have another email question?
I do. Will this plan also be implemented in the city's charter schools?
I'll answer that one. We don't have any control over the charter schools, so they'd have to operate their plans independently. So a parent with a child in a charter school would have to check with that charter school to see what their plan is going to be.
Thank you, Superintendent. Paul, on to the next text question, please.
This is another four-parter, although I think we've answered some of these. The first one, though, is will school food program still run with remote learning?
So yes, we will still be running our food distribution program. We'll be running it from the distribution centers we're running right now if we operate remotely. So we have 17 centers throughout the city, and we'd have them taking care of the meal service. And as of this point, we've delivered over 2 million meals since school closed in March. So that service has operated very well, and we'll absolutely commit to keep it going.
And we'll also continue to try with John Fuller, the Oasis Food Bank. We're doing that every Friday at Central High School. Very thankful to Sedesco, to the Food Bank of Western Massachusetts, Superintendent Warwick, Principal Tad Tokars. We're serving literally about 3,500 families every Friday with meat, milk, vegetables, fruits, and meals. So I made, and Superintendent, we made that commitment to continue the food programs no matter what happens. And I also believe that Superintendent Warwick and Pat Roach are doing the 4 to 6 p.m. now too, also, so nobody misses anything. So we are going to stay committed to that if we stay in remote or any type of transition to hybrid when it is publicly health-wise safe.
Second part, did you have multiple parts?
I do, yes. What is a plan for parents who are non-English speaking to get support with remote learning for their children? Maybe on tech.
Yeah, I think so.
So we know that in the spring, that was a challenge for our non-English speaking families to get support with technology. We are going to be putting a number of things in place. One of the more important will be, we're going to have a YouTube channel with a number of videos about how to access Springfield Public Schools technology, how to use our computers, and we will have those videos. A series of videos will be in English, but also, I believe, 5 or 6 other languages to try to support families struggling with the technology pieces.
Is that the last part of your?
No. How are the schools planning to provide emotional, mental health support to children given the huge adjustment?
I asked Dr. Marianne Morris to address that.
Could you repeat that question? I'm sorry, I didn't hear it all.
Sure. How are the schools planning to provide emotional and mental health support to children given the huge adjustment?
So, we have tiers of social emotional supports that we're going to be delivering. First and foremost, this has been a traumatic time for our children. And so we have been training all of our staff on trauma sensitive approaches. We're going to be providing a lot of support around the anxiety of dealing with either coming back or the continued remote environment. So we have PBIS, which incorporates a lot as well of trauma-informed practices. We have City Connects folks who are going to be reaching out, supporting families, getting them wraparound services. We have partnerships with clinics all over the city who will continue to work with us and work with our families around the anxiety during this time. Our counselors will be doing the same thing through the use of teletherapy, which they have been doing, not only reaching out and doing check-in, check-out, but also addressing the anxiety, working with our students and working with our parents to try to support their children. So lots of layers of support. Again, there's going to be a focus on the anxiety that has certainly arisen from this situation and these circumstances. We're going to be taking a good hard look at individual students through STAT processes. Again, whether it's in a in-person model or whether we're doing it virtually, monitoring our students' emotional status, helping parents get supports and helping our students get connected to our counselors and our people in our schools for supports. So.
Thank you, Dr. Iselle, I believe, do you have any more that were duplicates for email?
I would just like to say I have several emails that are more statements than questions and experiences than questions, and also some emails that contain like 10 to 12 questions within it. So I'm trying to go between those. What procedures do you plan on using to hold custodians accountable for ensuring that cleaning and disinfecting is being done?
So I'm going to have Coach that question.
So in all of our buildings, we have cleaning plans for every single one of the buildings that say how often, the frequency of how often different things need to be disinfected. We've updated all of the cleaning plans to focus on high touch point areas, like such as bathrooms, door handles, railings, entrances. So we'll ensure that those areas are sanitized frequently. We're also going to be cleaning classrooms in between anytime students change. So procedurally, we're not planning to allow students to go between classes. We're going to try to keep the kids together in cohorts in their room most of the day. But if we had a science room where we did share multiple classes, you know, one in the morning, one in the afternoon, it would be disinfected. So we have all the accountability measures in place.
Part 2 of the question, who will be with classes while teachers are on lunch breaks?
That would be organized by the principal when they set up the schedule for the school.
Is that it, Iselle, for that question?
Yes.
Thank you. We move to fall, because I believe Denise said she didn't have it.
What will happen for staff members assigned to multiple buildings? For example, art teachers, speech therapy, occupational therapy, school psychologists.
So I think most of the itinerant teachers are in the special ed division. So Dr. Morris, if you could start that one.
Yes, so the speech and language services, a lot of the related services have been being provided through teletherapy. We were lucky to get all of our speech and language pathologists trained in that through some free coursework through ASHA. So they'll be able to provide the service remotely to the students rather than having to move from building to building or classroom to classroom. Sorry. And that same teletherapy model will be done to the best of our ability with our other related services. We are still working on the school psychologist model or challenge. All districts are struggling with this. We will be commencing assessments of students. If it's remote, we're going to have to be looking at what we can do with regards to it, some assessments that can be done online, virtually, what information we can gather. So, there's no answer out there for that anywhere right now, not even in the National Association of School Psychologists. But we won't have them moving from building to building. Well, I mean, if we're in person, obviously the school psychologists will have to move from building to building. They'll have to go through a safety and hygiene regimen. But if it's in person and they are doing assessments, they will be doing it in a room with plexiglass and shields and transparent face masks and all of the PPE that will be necessary. So.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. I'm going to toss it back to you for the very first.
The art and music piece. Stefania, would you like to answer the art music question? If people are assigned to more than one building, what's the thought process now with Julie Jarrett on that?
Sure, we have discussed this. The plans are not finalized, and it would depend on if we go hybrid or completely remote. But since there isn't 100% in person, they wouldn't be going back and forth. So some students may be getting remote while some would be getting in person. It would be dependent on the model that we choose.
Thank you, Stefania.
Yep. Next question, I think this is a quick one. If a student chooses to stay fully remote and fall sports happen, can the student play sports?
That's a great question, and that I haven't seen any guidance from MIAA yet on, but we'll get more information out from MIAA when we get their guidance. So I don't have an answer on that. If students are remote, it is a question whether they can play sports.
Thank you. Back to Azelle.
Yes, and we've all been reminded to please slow down for our translators. With regard to remote classes, will it be just like going to school, but teachers are on a computer with students? So teachers are holding classes as if they are in class with students. The only difference is they are on a computer with students.
I'd like to on your issue, our Chief Instructional Officer.
So when students are remote, regardless if they are completely remote or in the hybrid remote, they will be getting instruction from their teachers. It would not look exactly like it does in an entire school day. For example, in the elementary school, students are sitting in an English language arts class for 2.5 hours.
Can you slow down just a little, please?
Slow down?
Down just a little.
Okay. So for example, in elementary school, students, when they are live, are in an English language arts class for 2.5 hours. If they were in a remote class, they would get instruction for part of that 2.5 hours, live instruction from the teacher. And the rest of the time it would be spent with students having activities and producing either projects or doing online work.
Vanya, can you slow your pace, please? The translators are having difficulty keeping up with you. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So they would have the live teacher in front of them, but it wouldn't be for the duration as if they were in person. But the work that is expected of the students would be exactly the same time. So if the teacher taught remotely for 45 minutes, the students would still have another hour and 15 minutes if the block was a 2-hour block.
Thank you, Stefan. Back to you, Paul, please.
the parent chooses to start the year remote only, and it's later safe to return to school, or they feel safe to return to school, and they come back.
Yeah, the DESI guidance is that we would allow a student back. We would just ask them to arrange the timing and scheduling with the principal, and then understand if it requires transportation, that we need some lead time to reprogram the bus to provide that transportation.
Thank you, Superintendent. Gazelle, your next question, or if you want to just read a comment at this point, that's fine.
Gazelle, you're muted.
Brendan, would you unmute Gazelle?
Thank you. Okay. I'll go with a question at hand and look for and get a comment for our next go round in the interest of time. How can you ensure the safety of the low incidence population when those students require one-to-one assistance? How can you maintain a 6-foot distance when teaching and learning involves hands-on?
Again, I'll have Dr. Morris answer that one.
So in those programs where we need adult proximity for our students for safety and instruction, our teachers and our staff are going to have a different level of PPE equipment. They will have whatever they need with regards to shields and masks and gowns and gloves to protect both the student and the staff from, you know, any kind of exposure. Again, these are going to be classes that are self-contained. There will be no movement outside of the class. All services will be coming in. We anticipate very low numbers in these classes. On a full class roster, it's 12. We don't anticipate that many of these classes will be full. So I think there will be plenty of space with regards to just the overall classroom, but the adults will be wearing a much higher level of protective equipment and when working with these students.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Before I ask Paul to read the question, we still have lots of questions. So in the interest of time, we're not going to answer any duplicate questions, number one. But number two, I would ask all presenters to please be as succinct as you possibly can, but while answering the question. So I'll go to you, Paul.
So with the onset of flu season, how will we distinguish between COVID symptoms and flu symptoms?
Would have Jeannie Clancy, our Director of Nursing, answer that.
Jeannie first.
Jeannie, you're muted.
Brenda, would you unmute Jeannie?
Yes, I'm unmuted. Okay, a challenge with the symptoms for flu and COVID are very similar. So the plan is to do a major push to get everybody to get their flu vaccine, which is available. We have already ordered it for the students. If we're in school, vaccine will be available for students to receive, and we'll do a push for staff to receive vaccine or at least get it on their own.
Thank you, Jeannie. That was Azelle, so right? That was it. So we're back to a text question, please. Oh, I'm sorry. Then Azelle, you're up. I'm sorry.
Okay. I have an email here with 17 questions. I will choose 3.
Thank you.
What are the consequences when kids don't distance or wear masks correctly?
So we will. Well, first,
As far as discipline.
yeah, we rely on the teacher to work with the students relative to the proper social distancing and mask wearing. And if they're not following the direction from there, we'd ask administration to support the teachers with those efforts.
When a teacher quarantines, do all of their classes quarantine?
Start with Jeannie.
Start with Jeannie.
All right. Jeannie?
Clancy?
Okay, so I would need more information on where the exposure happens, because you could quarantine because you traveled and the teacher wasn't in school. I think if we have someone who tests positive and has been told to quarantine, I would work with Springfield Health and Human Services and go over our contact tracing to see who potentially was exposed. And then, yes, there is a potential that our students and staff would be asked to quarantine if there was an exposure.
Thank you, Jeannie. Did you want it?
Well, just a couple of things. Jeannie's so right. 2 points. One around the flu. We do have testing that we can do for flu. So when you ask the question, the difference between COVID symptoms and flu symptoms, as Jeannie indicated, they are similar. However, we can isolate for flu. So there is something we can do to rule out flu. That would be the first thing. Quarantine is one thing, isolation is another. So if a person tests positive, they are isolated. The ring around them then becomes quarantined. And so that when someone is quarantined, it's because they were around someone for longer than 15 minutes who was positive, and that they were in the environment with that individual for less than 6 feet apart. So there are criteria around quarantining, and isolation is done for a positive person. Thank you, Jeannie. I just wanted to clarify that 2 points, if that's okay. Sorry.
We'll take all the help we can get.
That's right.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins.
One more question is, will students be allowed on a bus without a mask?
So the answer is no, they would, but bus drivers and bus monitors are going to have masks available. So if a student forgets a mask, they'll be provided with a mask so they can get on the bus and then go to school.
Thank you, Superintendent. Paul?
I'm not, so it sounds like I'm a parent. I'm not comfortable shopping for uniforms without being able to try them on for my growing teen. The question is, would we consider not requiring uniforms for the upcoming semester if in person?
I think we'd have to refer that to the subcommittee that deals with it's a policy. That would take an adjustment to the policy. We will take a look at that. It will be discussed in the subcommittee.
Most places are allowing individuals to take the uniforms home, try them on, and if they don't fit, bring them back. So you don't have to try them on in the store. You can try them on at home, and most places are allowing them to be returned if they do not fit.
Thank you very much. I don't have any idea of that.
So you're jack of all trades?
Yeah.
All commissioner in uniforms. That's right.
Gazelle, you're next, please. Gazelle, you're muted.
Okay, yes, I'm scrolling through. Okay. I am not a teacher. Staying home with the kids will require parents to quit their jobs at a time when families need all the money they can get. We need to get back to work and back to school. we can handle a virus that has a 98% plus chance of survivability. That is just part of an email where, getting a statement.
Okay, thank you. Paul?
Sorry, I'm trying to avoid duplicates here. This is a specific question about students in severe, they're described as severe special education, but saying children who will not wear masks or face shields, how are we protecting staff? Who are working with children who have various sensory needs and have a hard time staying in one spot.
I think a lot of that was answered. Probably the only part that wasn't answered was protecting the staff person. But I think Dr. Morris addressed all the rest of it.
I think she talked about the extra PPE for staff.
Oh, okay. So the extra the staff will be provided face shield.
Well, even gown.
Right. So that will bring us back to you, Azelle.
Okay. I am a teacher and I experienced a great burden. I will have a great burden no matter what the format of teaching, as we often have. Oh, she's talking about her specific teaching type. I am also a mom. Last spring, I encountered great inequities for teacher expectations as I had to oversee my second grader as she learned during a pandemic and tried my best to teach well over 200 children. I am not alone. How will teacher equity be addressed in every circumstance?
Well, I would say, as we certainly heard from teachers, we met with the union representing teachers every week since March, and listening to those issues and addressing them the best we can. These are challenging circumstances that we face in the pandemic. And I think we all need to work together to provide support for our staff and our families. The best.
I would just add to that the more robust at home online experience, it will help with that issue because they will be live interacting with teachers a lot more than they were last year, and that should help people who are trying to teach from home and have students at home.
Good point.
Paul, I believe that brings us to you.
So I can do a comment and then a question if you'd like. Comment is, I think it's a good idea if the kids stay home and the teachers and staff still report to their schools. I'm paraphrasing. Teachers and paras could use the classroom and resource of the classroom and collaborate while maintaining, while following social distancing. That's just a comment.
Are you going on to a question, or do you want to go?
I want you to go to Azelle. I'm trying to find
Azelle, are you ready with a question?
I am. Will empowerment zone schools have to follow the same guidelines as Springfield Public Schools?
So the Empowerment Zone School team has been meeting with us regularly since this started, and I believe they're going to be following almost all of the same protocols. But for any questions they have, they can contact the principal of the school.
Part 2, will all staff be provided with personal protection equipment materials?
Simple answer is yes.
Paul?
So does new scientific data that the COVID-19 virus could transmit airborne via aerosolized particles change the viability of in-person reopening?
Or you want Jeannie Clancer, our Director of Nursing, please.
Okay, I'm not sure I quite understand the question.
I think, Gene, I think there's been news stories about COVID possibly being airborne in terms of transmission, and does that change the plan?
Okay, so the challenge is, Helen might be able to help me, that right now that it's a respiratory virus that's transmitted through droplet in the air, and our mode of protection is for people to wear face coverings and social distance. But I haven't heard what's new on the news, so I don't want to misspeak. Maybe Commissioner Colton has more of an update.
It's not really an update. The scientific community is having a discussion about droplets versus aerosol. And aerosol is tinier, smaller than the droplets. And so there is debate around the transmission, whether it's aerosolized or whether it's droplets. And so I think that's the question, is asking those questions between the two ways in which the virus can be spread. And what we know is that there's been no conclusion, as many epidemiologists and infectious disease individuals have talked about this. There's no concrete answer. So we would take the same precautions for both situations. And I don't see one being particularly more pervasive at this time than the other, although aerosols are smaller, microscopic droplets. And I think that that's the question. And I would say right now, we don't have a concrete answer. It is up to the school. If we knew that it was aerosol, then the school department, certainly along with you, Jeannie, and your staff, can make recommendations around how to move forward.
Thank you both. So Giselle, do you have a question for us?
Yes, I do. I don't know what happened to my.
Paul has one quick one if you want.
Okay, go ahead, please do.
And homeschooling be an option?
So parents have an option for homeschooling within the homeschooling law, so they would have to file with our academic office, with Devin Sheehan, if they were interested in homeschooling. But if they're really looking for remote support from a teacher, they'd be better off with a remote-only option, because they'd have the teacher actually supervising the program for them instead of having to run it themselves. So they'd still have a homeschooling option, but we would encourage them to think about the remote-only option, because our staff at their school would support them.
Giselle, did you find your question?
It just disappeared, but I can paraphrase. Are you considering the latest information around the virus that seems to indicate that children are affected more than originally thought by the virus? And that's a paraphrase. The email just disappeared.
Jeannie Clancy, our Director of Nursing.
Okay, so the challenge with COVID-19 is the information is evolving as we go forward. And there's different studies out there. And it depends upon whether you're reading on the CDC site. For the opening of schools, they talk about that there isn't consistent information yet, that we're still learning how children are going to be affected. And I think they know for now that the children, the cases are generally milder. So the numbers for the children could evolve as testing evolves. I think this is what was the original question, Azelle? Whether we know the numbers are going up in children?
Whether we have.
Well, I'm actually glad you asked, because the person sent the email in again after I said disappeared. Are you considering recent news reports that cite research that shows children have been shown to be the majority group of asymptomatic carriers?
Yes, I think we're considering everything for the safety of opening of school, and we're trying to stay current with all new data that's out. And the fear is that children can transmit the virus to adults. But if we have our safety systems in place, because remember, opening of schools, the plan is multi-steps for the mitigation factors. We're using the face coverings, social distancing, hand washing to cohort the students to prevent the spread, because we know students could come into school that are asymptomatic or with mild cases that wouldn't be picked up with a mask on. It's a combination of all symptoms and keeping children home if they're sick and staff home if they're sick that will slow the spread.
Thank you. Paul?
You kind of asked this as a follow-up, I suppose. How are we going to ensure that staff or students who travel to a hotspot either complete a test or do a 14-day quarantine before they come back to school?
So again, I'd have to defer to Jeannie on that.
Okay, and we've put out or working on a statement to go out to let everybody know that's traveled, but that's one of the mitigating factors that we're putting into place, that people have to self-report. And if they don't, I'm not sure how we would know unless someone else told us that they travel, but we're working on the education piece because it's about someone's actions could impact the health and safety of somebody else. So it's really important through the education that everybody's accountable for the behavior that's going to stop the spread.
So actually, I'm going to ask Helen to answer a question for me. I believe the state of Massachusetts still has a mandatory 14-day quarantine if you have come from a quote unquote hotspot. So I guess the answer would be if we know somebody has come, we have good knowledge that they know they've come from a hotspot, they'll be told to follow the state mandate and self-quarantine. We have to test.
And we would enforce that as a Board of Health.
If you couldn't hear Helen, she said, and the Board of Health would enforce that as well. Iselle?
If parents are choosing the hybrid model, do they get to choose which days of the week their student is in school?
No, we can't offer a choice on that. We've made decisions to balance the size of the groups out. So at this juncture, the answer would be no on that.
Well,
If a student exhibits symptoms during the school day and they go to the medical waiting room, as Jeannie outlined, and the family does not have transportation to pick them up, what happens?
And I'd like Jeannie to answer that.
Okay, so in the past, when we've had parents notified, because we're not going to be able to put the child on a bus, then we work with the family to find a friend or somebody else with a vehicle to transport the child home.
okay, Iselle?
When will a decision be made about what reopening plan we will be moving forward with?
That's an excellent. We are scheduled to make a decision on Thursday, 2 days from now. If the committee feels that it has enough information at that point in time to make a decision, I would expect they'll do it that night. If the majority of the committee feels they do not have enough information, my guess is they won't make the decision that evening. It will be delayed, but it certainly can't be delayed for very long if it is delayed. Paul?
Will there be physical education? And will students have to wear a mask during physical education?
Would defer to Stefania Rochelle, our Chief Academic Officer, on that.
So the Department of Ed has given us guidelines on physical education.
On your page, please.
The Department of Education has given every district guidelines on what they can and can't do for physical education. And so it is suggested that if possible, it could be held outside with students socially distanced. It gives the exact footage that students need to be apart if they do wear a mask or if they do not wear a mask. We have also planned on doing physical education without really touching anything. So there are other ways to do physical education, whether it be aerobics. I apologize.
This is a demonstration of a working mom taking care of her kids and her job at the same time.
And so there are ways to continue to do physical education while being socially distanced. Now, if we are remote, we will continue to have physical education. And most of our physical education teachers also teach health. So they would be doing a combination of both.
Thank you, Stefan. Next.
Will there be preschool in the public schools this year?
So, we're working towards having a preschool program. And again, how we offer that program will be part of our reopening plan when that decision is made.
Thank you, Superintendent. Izell?
Will there be any changes in school assignments? Would it be easier to assign children to their neighborhood school rather than busing children?
So we have a student assignment plan where the address dictates where a student goes to school. So we follow that plan. Typically, they're assigned to the school, the closest neighborhood to the school anyway. So, but we have to follow that relative to the plan to keep the numbers in each school manageable, which is going to be very important for the situation. So we follow our typical student assignment plan.
Thank you, Superintendent. Paul?
Sorry, I'm just trying to weed out into this.
We can pop to Izell if she's ready.
I have an email with a two-part question specifically in regards to ventilation. What benchmarks and timelines are in place to ensure that all of the environmental health and safety plans are met before returning to buildings?
Absolutely.
And will that information be made publicly available?
Thank you, Izell.
Sullivan, our Director of
Director
Facilities,
Sullivan.
answer that question.
Yes, we're reviewing all of our systems as we speak, and we are working with an industrial hygienist from O'Reilly Cabot and Oak, reviewing all of our systems, and we will be preparing that information for the superintendent and the school committee for Thursday night's meeting.
Thank you.
What about schools with windows that do not open or no windows?
So there are schools that have those situations, and many of those have a air filtration system that is, they're not meant to open. So we are reviewing those type of situations with the industrial hygienist as well.
And the facilities team are working on any issues with windows that don't open if they just need a repair also.
Yes.
They've been very aggressive on working on those work orders.
Thank you.
Thank you, Patrick.
Thanks, Izell. Is that the end of that two-part question?
There is another part. How are we acquiring supplies needed for safety upgrades? And is there any anticipation of a problem in the supply chain?
So we've been working hard with the mayor's team to purchase the PPE equipment. And with the mayor's support, he's given us over $3 million from grants and everything on the city side budget, so that we don't have to take the money from the school budget. We have a robust budget to provide what we need for our students. And the ordering of all the PPE has gone very well. But again, I appreciate the mayor's support. In addition to that, the mayor gave us an extra $2 million for K-2 computers, where we had a computer for every other student. Now we have a computer for every student. So right now, the mayor's contributed $5 million extra dollars out of his budget. So we have what we need to open. And I'm grateful for the support. Thank you.
Paul? Thank you.
I think this is just a quick process question. If I want to keep my daughter in remote learning, how do I do that? How do I let the school know?
So the schools are going to be reaching out to each and every parent. So you just let the school know exactly what you want, and we'll honor that request.
Thank you. Giselle?
I'm going to shorten the question a little bit. With remote learning, how will attendance be observed? And is there danger of having to repeat the same grade next year?
So with respect to attendance, we will be taking attendance every day, whether we are remote or in person. The way that we will do that is every student will be expected to start their day with a virtual meeting on a remote day, with a virtual meeting with the homeroom, advisory, or crew teacher. And we will take attendance during that virtual meeting. With respect to the second part of the question, we will be, so when we closed after March 13th, we shifted to grading pass-fail. If we remain remote or for hybrid this coming year, we will be following the district's grading policy and the district's pupil progression plan, which outlines what students have to accomplish to progress to the next grade.
Thank you, Paul. And that actually brings you to read a question.
Yep. If pre-K students are given the option of remote learning, will they be provided with a device?
Not at this point. We don't have a plan to provide them with a new device. But I think Dr. Morris could do a better job answering that question, because there are other plans for those students.
So, yeah, I think I talked about this a little earlier. We have different types of instructional processes or approaches for our pre-K students that involve. We had great success this summer. We had work packets go out, as I said, with a lot of manipulatives and books and instructions. Teachers reached out to the students and the families to support them working with these materials. That went really well. It's hands-on types of activities when students are that young. It's really a very strong way of engaging the student. Also, we're going to be looking at different types of access to videos and various kinds of virtual opportunities for stories being read aloud, sing-alongs, virtual field trips, that kind of a thing that might be able to be streamed like through a public TV channel or something like that. So we are working on that.
Thank you, Mary. Dr. Morris. Giselle, do you have another question?
Yes. With regards to remote, are you working with EEC vouchers for those days that children will be out of school. Not just before and after school programs, but for those days that they will be at home, so parents can still work. Maybe kids can work on their laptops with this community-based program while parents are working.
I would defer to Morris on that.
I'm not totally clear on the question. We don't use vouchers. That's my understanding of that is that vouchers are being used for private daycares or other daycare situations. Am I not understanding that question?
I think, Mary Ann, well, I think they're asking if we are going to help folks get vouchers to get child care for their kids on days they're not at school.
So the voucher system is run by the state. We don't
Yeah.
have a voucher system. So that's run by the Department of Early Childhood Department at the state level. And they'd have to inquire there to get the answer on vouchers.
Thank you. Paul, the next question, please.
Will every school follow the same model for remote learning, or is it open to interpretation for each school?
So I'd like Stefania Rishilla to answer that.
So all schools will follow the same model in regards to the amount of time spent on each subject. But it would not, the schedule would not all be the same as far as 9 a.m. would be math in every building. But there would be a set schedule as far as amount of time online, and which would be live, and the amount of time to complete work.
Thank you, Stefania. Giselle, do you have another question?
What plans are in place to prepare seniors for the SATs? This usually occurs during the spring, but due to COVID, that did not take place.
Did Kim Wells, the Chief School Officer for Secondary, address that?
Sure, we're working with our Director of Guidance, Dr. Yolanda Johnson, to think about SATs and what those look like moving forward along with the PSATs. So more information will be coming out regarding that.
Thank you. Paul?
Are we cleaning bathrooms after each student uses it, or there is a diaper change?
Patrick Roach, who heads that division.
Pat, are you there?
You want Pat Sullivan? You want Pat Sullivan?
Pat Sullivan, can you?
So, anytime there was a diaper change being made, that room should be cleaned after that happens.
Thank you. Thanks, Pat. That was Giselle, right? I'm sorry, Giselle?
If a hybrid model is chosen, who does teacher duties such as attendance, since the I'll read it as is. If we are hybrid, who will do all of these teacher duties, like taking attendance and giving lessons, since the actual classroom teachers will be busy teaching in person?
So maybe I could take it. Obviously, the teachers who are teaching in person would have their primary obligation to the kids in front of them at that time, and the teachers who are supporting remote learning would take care of the students who are on the remote side. And then they work together and collaborate to deliver for those students on Wednesday.
Okay, Paul? No. Back to you, Giselle, if you've got one ready.
I do. Can you hear me?
Yes.
The question is around workers' compensation. If a teacher catches COVID in the classroom.
So Melissa Shea. Is Melissa on the line?
I am. We're working with our providers on the workers' compensation question regarding the process.
Thank you. Paul, do you have one now?
Yep. Will training be provided to parents on the use of educational technology so they'll be better able to support their children? I can take that. I think
so. You read it. The answer.
We spoke to that a little bit in the presentation, but we are doing a variety of things. So there's the YouTube channel that I previously mentioned with videos in multiple languages. We are also providing training to school-based staff so that they're also positioned to help families. And we're going to ensure that there's some orientation taking place through each school individually to support students and families with access to technology.
Isabel?
Can parents that are also educators opt for remote teaching?
Teachers who have kids at home ask to be assigned to remote teaching.
They can ask their principal. That would be something that they want them to do for their assignments.
Thank you. Paul?
So this is sort of a statement, but I think it could help a question to clarify. Through this suggestion that classroom teachers will simultaneously teach students in the classroom in front of them and teachers and students who are learning remotely. So teaching both groups at the same time. So I plan. I thought we should.
Right. No, that's a good question. That is not our plan as it stands right now.
The answer to that was no,
No.
they won't be teaching both groups simultaneously. Isabel, do you have a question?
Yes, the writer expresses frustration with the remote model from the spring and asks the question, will the remote and hybrid model provide the same quality of learning as in person?
So to be perfectly honest, I don't want to tell you that remote instruction would teach traditional class. But the remote model we put in place in the spring was an emergency short-term model with certain conditions for staff and students, which are going to be changed. So there's going to be a much more robust remote model offered. And again, the hybrid model is also going to be much more robust than we were talking about earlier. But again, I wouldn't say to anyone that, you know, should we get a vaccine and we could bring the students back in front of teachers 5 days a week, that would be our preferred model, of course.
Thank you, Superintendent. Paul?
We have a question from a parent of an autistic child. The question is around, it sounds like concern that fully remote over the 3 months that we did it last year was challenging. So how are we helping students who have disabilities like autism if we go fully remote? How are we supporting them and supporting their learning?
So I would have Dr. Morris respond to that.
Yeah. Yes.
You addressed a lot of that already, so if you could give an overview of what you have said, would be helpful.
I'd like to echo what the superintendent had said. We've learned a lot with regards to providing remote learning for our students with disabilities, our students with autism. We have put in a summer remote learning program that was much more structured and much more, I think, individualized and tailored for our students. And it was very successful. So we would be continuing along that path, offering all of the various types of methodologies, including the structure, the predictability, the personal connection, the communication supports, the ABA models of instruction, those types of things. We have autism specialists who have been very dedicated to this work through the spring, and in the summer, we have our special ed teachers who are also very dedicated to making it the best possible experience for our children. We know that our parents need a lot of support when they're trying to kind of sit in and support their children with disabilities. So we're going to be doing a lot of outreach with our parents, again, through our autism specialists, giving them tips and strategies to deal with behaviors, sensory issues, communication issues. So.
Thank you. Giselle?
I'm seeing a lot of repeat questions. So I have one here, and then I'll defer to Paul if he has a number of new questions coming in, and I'll try to field through these a little bit more for something that we haven't answered already. Are you hiring more staff and more nurses?
So we're according to our staffing allocation plan, as we've done in the past. We don't have an increased budget right now to go beyond the staffing level we have, but depending on what the state offers us, we'd look into that if there's more financial support from the state. But we don't have a firm budget from the state as of yet. So we're keeping our staffing levels at the same as last year.
Paul? I have a host of questions on the topic we've spoken to already, which is how can teachers teach kids remotely and teach kids in person at the same time? So it's probably just worth reiterating. Schools will be designing schedules so that teachers have times when they're supporting kids learning remotely and times when they're teaching kids in person, not both at the same time. So just there's a bunch of questions that felt like worth reiterating. There's a question, how are teachers getting their planning or lunchtime if other teachers are not supposed to come in and out of their classrooms?
So we're limiting movement in the buildings, but we're not going to have a situation where obviously a teacher would have to come in and cover. We're not going to move the students. We'd have a different teacher come in and cover. So we plan on providing a prep and lunch for our teachers as we have in the past and according to the contract, with other teachers coming in but not moving the students.
Paul, can you see any more new ones where you are?
I'm working on 180 I haven't read, so
Nope. Giselle, have you seen any new ones where you are?
No.
Please bear with us, people. Paul's dealing with text questions, and there's a slew of them, and he's trying to screen them to make sure we don't waste everybody's time answering questions that have already been asked. So he needs a few minutes to go through those questions.
So I'll just throw this one out while I'm looking. I think this is a question from a staff member. If we're exposed to COVID and need to quarantine 2 weeks, do we have to use our sick time?
So I would have Melissa Shea come on from HR.
Sure. So there's certain protections under the FFRCA for purposes of quarantine. So for the 14 days, it would be covered under the FFRCA, the federal law.
You know, subsequent questions do come up after the fact. Right. They can be emailed as appropriate to school department.
Well, and then while Paul's searching, this is going to be a good time to just tell people that when this ends, there will immediately go live a survey, and it does have a section at the end of the survey where people can ask additional questions if we haven't gotten to it or you thought about it afterwards, where they'll be able to submit additional questions and or comments, and those questions would be answered in a frequently asked question type of sheet that would get updated on the website. So there's going to be, if just in case people don't think, and we all have left a meeting and said, I wish I asked this question. When that survey goes live, you can go on and answer the survey and also enter your question, and it will be addressed to a frequently asked question type of list.
I have a question from a working parent. Will there be leniency for when things need to be completed by the student if they want to do remote only? Question number 2, will a vaccine be required for students when it becomes available? And the third part, will the remote learning only option be taught by a teacher from the student's school or a teacher from the state?
So, you want to address the leniency question first, because we did build some things in first.
Yeah, so with respect to leniency, whether we're hybrid or remote, the learning activities and graded assignments that students have to complete when they're remote, we are articulating an expectation that they be given no less than a week from the time an assignment is assigned until it has to be turned in.
So the vaccine, I think we'd have to see what comes mandated from the Department of Public Health at the time, whether it becomes a requirement or not.
I think that when a vaccine does become available, we will, as the superintendent said, get guidance from the CDC and the State Department of Public Health. I envision that the vaccines will probably go to those most vulnerable initially, such as our elderly, who we see a high death rate. As far as schools and teachers are concerned, that guidance again will come from CDC and DPH and then filter to us. But when we have a vaccine, it is going to take time to get that vaccine to everyone in the nation who needs one. So I would anticipate it's going to be a process that is going to be layered.
Thank you, Helen.
And then the last part of that question was for remote learning option, only fully remote, will it be a Springfield teacher or a teacher from the state?
It'd be a Springfield teacher.
Yeah,
What technology will be used in schools for live video lessons? For that, we will give teachers some latitude to use, they can use Zoom or they can use Microsoft Teams. Just for parents, I know that there was a lot in the press about Zoom. We do have parameters where we require there to be a password if you're using Zoom, and we require that those meetings that include students not be recorded, or certainly not be recorded if students' faces are visible. So we have some protections in place, but those are the technologies we'd be using. Question, should I go ahead? Yep. Question from a teacher. Will teacher internet service be partially paid for by the district since it's a requirement of the job?
We haven't even thought about that. We'll have to have some discussion over it.
I have another question from teacher. Will staff at alternative schools, for example, be mandated to perform protective holds if a student is a danger to themselves or others?
Have Dr. Morris address that question.
Can you repeat that again, Azelle?
Yes.
Schools, would the alternative school teachers be mandated to do protective holds?
You know, protective holds are obviously, I wouldn't use the word mandated, but required whenever there's a situation of imminent danger. So if there's imminent danger, we have to intervene and protect the individuals from getting seriously hurt. So I would say we're going to have to revisit the purpose of restraints, the purpose of protective holds. We're going to really have to do a lot of emphasis on de-escalation to avoid hands-on and kinds of restraints whenever possible. But I can't say that there won't be a situation, God forbid, I hope not, but where a physical restraint would have to be necessary in order to avoid somebody getting seriously hurt.
Thank you, Dr. Morris. Giselle, did I see you pop up because you were trying to say something or just there was some...
No, I know it's Paul's turn for the question, so you can go ahead.
I have a series of questions asking, are we doing regular mandatory COVID testing of staff and students?
So I defer to our director of nursing on that.
Oops. Jeannie, are you there?
Paul, can you repeat the question? I heard something about testing.
Doing regular COVID testing of all staff and students in the buildings.
Mandatory.
Mandatory.
No, at this time, there is no mandatory testing for all staff and students. We would refer for testing for anyone who was symptomatic or potentially has been exposed.
Thank you.
Another question from a teacher. Will student grading be the same as last year? And will the attendance policy be the same?
So the student grading will not be the same as the end of last year. It will not be credit, no credit. We're going to go back to our traditional grading system in our traditional attendance. Because now this is a long-term situation, not a short-term.
Paul, do you have anything there?
So a question about the windows remaining open, is that going to continue when cold weather starts?
That's weather permitting. I think that's weather permitting. We don't want to freeze the students or the place. That includes the buses.
A series of questions on that. There's a question, will there be new school hours? I think they can start in.
So not at the school hours.
Will homemade masks be acceptable, made out of cloth, only disposable?
Answer that. So, I think Michelle was talking here, she's talking about face coverings.
Homemade masks, as long as they're tightly woven, are acceptable. Masks that are surgical masks with the 3 layers, obviously, are acceptable. But yes, I would say homemade masks, as long as they're tightly woven. That would be the tightly woven is the mask I have on now. It's tightly woven. The mayor is tightly woven. But Mr. Collins is has a disposable mask that's acceptable. So the key is something that's tightly woven. I would not see someone putting a bandana over their face that's loose and allows droplets to come through in any fashion in a school setting, which is indoors.
Thank you, Helen. Thank you. Thanks. Jeannie, did you, your voice, I mean, your picture's up there. Did you want to add anything, or was it you just, because you were the last one to speak, that that's up there?
I think it's because I wasn't muted, sorry.
Okay, thank you. Paul, do you have another question?
I have a comment that merits some clarification. That somebody is saying, so currently the only requirement for face-to-face online with the teacher is a morning meeting. So just to clarify, that's not what we're saying. We did say that for purposes of taking attendance, students would have a morning meeting every day that's mandatory, that is virtual on remote days. But I think we're also saying that students will have, per class or per subject area, between 2 and 4 virtual remote classes with their teachers every week. So there will be a significant amount of online live instructional time with teachers and students. I just wanted to clarify, because this was a comment that came halfway through the meeting, that someone had the impression that we were saying the only face-to-face was a morning meeting.
Thank you, Paul. I just saw a couple of messages coming from one of the school committee people asking that we give another plug, or in other words, announce once again that the survey will go live, and we encourage as many people as possible to fill out that survey as soon as this meeting is over. And Focus Springfield sent us a note that said we have had about 5,000 people log on, more than 5,000 people log on. It shows you the level of concern that our parents and everybody in this community has, and we are very happy to see that kind of participation. And we'll remind you, I'm sure, once more before we get off, about please taking the survey and asking any additional questions that you have.
I have another question from a parent, which is more of a clarification. It was stated that attendance will be taken during remote learning. If the parent is working and the child isn't able to attend the meeting, the attendance meeting, until after the fact, does that mean that the child does not get credit for being in attendance for the day?
So we are looking at, when I spoke to the daily attendance in the morning meeting, that's how we're going to try to capture daily attendance. But we are also looking at ways to capture and track student participation in those live virtual classes that are going to take place during other parts of the day, and try to figure out a way to account for that when recording student attendance. But there's work that is ongoing to work that out.
And we're not trying to encourage people not to go to the homeroom meeting, however.
No, I mean, that will be our daily attendance record.
It's where they're going to address some social emotional issues and other things. So we'd like to see as many people participate in that as possible.
So another that is, we've answered it, but it might merit clarification. So the question is, will you be picking up books for homeschooling? And just to clarify the difference between homeschooling and remote. So homeschooling would be a parent taking on full responsibility for educating their child, and they would not be accessing resources from the district, including books, laptops, etc. But in the case of a student participating in remote learning with the district, we will be doing we will be working to provide the necessary materials. Is that? Yes.
It could mean something else. The questioner might have also meant a third thing. We'll be assigning homeschool teachers just because someone wants to keep someone home. And we are not going to have the kind of staff.
No.
And the homeschooling that we have provided for students has always been for medical issues and medical reasons. Once in a while, you have a student has a surgery and they have to be out. That's a whole, but someone might have meant that when they asked the question. So I just want to make sure that there's not all these staff out to send to people's homes to teach.
Anything else?
Another staff question. What type of supports for emotional and mental wellness will be available for staff, COVID related?
I thought Dr. Morris addressed that earlier, as I recall, but there's a host of different supports between our school adjustment counselors, our school counselors, our City Connects wraparound services. We're going to have, a private therapist also doing teletherapy. So there's a host of services to provide supports for families.
Okay. Is this for staff?
It's staff, but that would apply.
Yeah,
the same.
Same, okay. Yes.
Right. Now, in the text, we still have, because some people are asking, going back and re-asking questions, and there are some we haven't gotten to. There's still a large number, over 100, excess of 100 questions in text that we haven't even had a chance to open yet. We will not leave them unaddressed. They will be open if we just, at some point we've got to end this meeting. If we have to end this meeting before we've gotten to those, they'll be addressed through the frequently asked question and the answer pages that will be put up, which you're going to see when you go on your survey and fill out your survey and ask your additional questions. That they will all, those will also be answered. Yeah, what we're finding is there's a lot of repeats coming through, and quite honestly, we've had a lot. I have to commend Focus Springfield and all of our additional staff that have been here to run this kind of a meeting with 5 other languages being done simultaneously was an unbelievable task. Both our internal staff that have participated, thank you from the bottom of our hearts, and Focus Springfield, as always, you're an unbelievable partner when it comes to this kind of technology. Parents are not getting this kind of service, I don't know, anyplace else. And we don't begrudge doing it, we wanted to do it. That's why we asked to have this kind of a forum. This is very helpful for us and for the listeners, the 5,000 people who tuned in.
Yeah, which is great.
We'd like to thank, again, all the school committee members and school committee member Tony Naylor and Vice Chair Collins, thank you. I'm putting this in. School committee woman Denise Hurst, thank you for the translation. And Espanol on that. To all the administration, I want to thank my city side team, Pat, Director Pat Sullivan, and Health and Human Services Commissioner Helen Carlton Harris for being here. Obviously, the Focus Springfield area, halfback Brendan, everyone on that, Danny, her team, to give us answers. To continue to do that when you fill out your survey. We will be having another emergency school committee meeting this Thursday, and at that possible time, if school committee members feel all the pertinent information is in, we will render a decision at that point in time. But as I opened up, besides a structural, educational aspect that will be put forth, we're going to base this decision in the best interest of our students, families, staff, teachers on public health, medical, and with sciences as we move forward. And we have worked very hard to defeat this COVID-19 and coronavirus, which we will. And it's last thing I'll say before I turn over to Superintendent, Vice Chair Collins, and school committee members. This is extraordinary times. We're in surreal times, and we deeply, deeply appreciate the patience and understanding each and every one of you, the viewers now, have shown in working together in a team concept. So we're going to continue to go 24/7, head, heart, and gut, and work night and day to make sure that our students, your children, and the staff and family members are all respected in their needs. And again, we want to continue to work together. So with that, I'll turn over to the Vice Chair or Superintendent Warwick, the school committee members for any closing comments. But over 5,000 people are viewing this, and it is going to be rebroadcast also, and we'll be back on this Thursday at 6 p.m.
So once again, the address is on the screen, but if for some reason you have difficulty reading it, Paul, so that you'll use the right lingo, as a tech guy, would you read the address to put in?
Oh, sure. Just so https://bit.ly/SPS20 opening, OPENING. And for those who are watching and have your cell phone handy, or if you're not watching on your cell phone, if you hold your phone up to that code in the upper right, turn on your camera on your cell phone, hold your camera up so it picks up that code in the upper right corner of the screen, it should take you directly to the survey.
And thank you to all the translators too. Thank you.
So that was put in the chat box, but Azelle, this particular screen for the next day or so, can we make sure this is prominent on our webpage so that if people will have a place to go to, they can just click on that link?
Yes, we absolutely will.
Thank you.
Thank you, Azelle.
At this point, I think, oh, sure.
Just like to thank the staff that have worked tirelessly since this pandemic began to provide quality services and put this plan together. And it's been like 24/7. So I just want to commend them and thank them for the wonderful responses to the parents and staff.
And just school committee people, do you have, I mean, I know you probably all feel like I did, we're overwhelmed by the amount of participation, but if you'd like to make a comment at this point in time, I think I'd like to hear from you. Anybody from the school committee?
Sure, I'll go, Vice Chair. Thank you. I echo the mayor's sentiments and thanking both you and School Committee Woman Latonya Naylor for suggesting the town hall, and to the superintendent and his cabinet for the amount of work that they put in to share this information. And I am really pleased with the turnout, 5,000, and then Brendan was able to send me on a side chat that 3,700 tuned in English, and the remainder were in all of the other 5 translation feeds. So that, I think, is really important, that we were able to get such a great cross-section of individuals to join. I think that there were a lot of great questions that were asked this evening. I'm interested to continue to see the other questions that come in. I think that there's a lot of information that we need to take into consideration, and this probably will be one of the most critical decisions that we make as school committee members. And so to the viewing audience, I will say that please continue to reach out to us, and we appreciate it. And we know that we need to be really mindful about keeping our students and our teachers safe.
Thank you, Ms.
Maria, I saw Maria ready to speak. Maria, do you want to make a comment?
Yes, I think this is very important to the viewing out there. Please give us feedback in this survey. I know we're going through hard times, but your guidance will be very well appreciated. Thank you to everyone, to the staff in particularly. It does work when we all work together as a community. Thank you and have a good night.
Thank you. Barbara, are you still on, Mrs. Gresham? She may have lost.
Any other school committee members?
Brenda, Barbara, are you muted by any chance? Did you have something you wanted to say? I don't have the screen in front of me where I can see everybody's face, so I apologize for calling out names.
I still see Barbara Chris on, but she is muted.
Brendan, could you unmute Mrs. Gresham just in case she has something to say?
Barbara, you should be able to speak now, my friend.
Barbara?
Ms. Gresham?
Okay. Is there, did I miss somebody? Is there somebody else?
Yes, yours truly. Yes, I just want to, this is Latonya Naylor for anyone who might not be able to see my face. I just do also echo the sentiments of my fellow school committee women. and that we are just really elated to have such a presence from the public. I think that oftentimes people make assumptions about our community and us being in an urban community and our families. And I'm so thankful to be able to put the naysayers to rest and say that our community really does care about what happens. And it's not just our families, but also our educators and our staff that are very concerned about what we do, what our next steps are. And what I love is that all the emails, and we've received several emails, letters, phone calls, in addition to all of those that are present. And we're constantly hearing people talk about the importance of education and making sure that we understand that it's not that they don't want our kids educated, but it's just we want to make sure we do it properly, appropriately, equitably, and that we are considering everything when we make our decision. And so I'm thankful to our chair and our vice chair and our superintendent and your team for making this happen so that we could provide a platform to be able to engage and show that we, in fact, are not just talking to talk, but we really want to walk it. And we really do want to hear what people have to say so that we can make the best decision. And as I said a few days ago, I want to be able to sleep at night with whatever decision we make. And in order to do that, I have to know that we've done everything that we could do to come up with the best decision possible. So thank you again to everyone and have a wonderful night.
Just to clarify, it was Mrs. Naylor who first brought the idea up. I took over and tried to do the technology, but I want to make sure everybody realizes it came from Mrs. Naylor who brought this forward.
Yeah, thank you. Great idea.
So since we opened, Mayor, with the roll call, I believe we're still under public meeting. Right. You should do, if there's a motion to adjourn at this point in time. Oh, just one further update. I was just told we have over 1,000 surveys done. And I think it was Dean Martin. I'm really dating myself. We used to have a show who at the end of the show would always say, keep those cards and letters coming on in, folks. So keep those surveys coming in, people.
That's the Chris Collins show. Tune in at 9 p.m. from 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. on all networks there.
Probably only a few of us that
Yeah.
remember the Dean Martin.
So if there's no other comments from school committee members, again, thank you. Thank you to everybody who's been involved. Vice Chair?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn. Is there a second?
So moved.
Second by Ms. Naylor. Roll call vote is required. Madam Clerk, please call the roll.
Sure. Ms. Hurst?
Yes.
Attorney Murphy?
You might be muted.
Absent.
He was on.
Oh, yeah.
Yep.
Okay. Ms. Naylor?
Yes.
Ms. Gresham?
She could be.
I think Barbara's having difficulty.
Barbara's having.
Okay.
Oh, she just said thumbs up. Good. There we go.
Thank you.
Okay. Ms. Perez?
Yes.
Mr. Collins?
Yes.
And Mayor Sarno?
This matter passes. Good evening. Thank you for watching. I hope you're all safe and I hope you all have power, and we will see you again Thursday at 6 p.m. for another emergency school committee meeting where a possible vote will be taken on what direction we will move on. God bless and good health.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.